A very good morning, and thank you for joining us for this live digital event, which is focused on building bridges in the time of COVID-19. I'm Bronwyn Nielsen, and I will be your moderator throughout the session. Just to give you a brief overview of the event that has been put together today, the African Export-Import Bank, or AfExim Bank, in collaboration with the African Union Commission, or the AUC, is proud to be hosting this event to promote the 1-year mark before the Intra-Africa Trade Fair. Again, the acronym there is IATF2021, that will take place in Kigali, Rwanda, from September the 6th to the 12th, 2021. And that will be under the theme, Building Bridges for a Successful AFCFTA. This virtual event today, we are promoting the IAF 2021 conference and hoping to excite you to register and attend IAAF 2021, as well as provide insight as to what can be expected during the Trade and Investment Conference. The program addresses how small businesses have overcome COVID-19 and looks at the opportunities that abound as a result of the global COVID-19 pandemic. The conference will, of course, in 2021, without a doubt, be one of the most important events on the African business calendar for the year, and it'll span 4 days. The conference will offer uniquely insightful and rewarding experience to attendees through a wide-ranging program featuring compelling keynote speeches, roundtable discussions, and a series of main and parallel sessions designed to provide comprehensive analysis of the role of the African Continental Free Trade Area, which will play the growth and the role that will play in the growth in the coming decades for the African continent. A little more about IATF 2021, and again, it'll be providing a unique and valuable platform for businesses to explore integrated African market of over 1.2 billion people. Of course, that's across the African continent, with a combined GDP, gross domestic product, of over 2.5 trillion US dollars, created under the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. The successful launch on the 7th of July 2019 of the operational phase of AFCFTA has brought into focus the great potential for trade, investment, and socio-economic development for the African continent. And among others, the objectives of the Intra-Africa Trade Fair include bringing together continental and global players to showcase and exhibit their goods and services, and to explore business and investment opportunities in or across the continent, providing a platform to share trade, investment, and market information with multiple stakeholders, and also to discuss and identify solutions to the challenges affecting intra-Africa trade. And of course, intra-Africa trade sitting at the moment between 15 to 17%, depending on what metric you actually take. Before we go any further, just a couple of housekeeping rules when it comes to the digital platform that we are engaging on today. And at the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a multiple application engagement tool where you can use all of the functionality. And the engagement tools are resizable and movable. So make it accessible for yourself so that you can follow today's session with ease. If you have any questions throughout the webcast, we do encourage you to use the Q&A function, and as far as possible, we will answer those questions during the session. If, of course, the questions need a more in-depth answer, we will engage via email post the session. All of the questions today are being recorded, so you have no doubt that we will come back to you. For the best audio quality, of course, this is all about the fact that you can see and hear us. It's very important for you to make sure that your computer speakers or the headset that you are using are turned on and that the volume is up so that you can hear the presenters. Just again, another caution is that some networks cause the slides to advance more slowly than others. So logging off your VPN is recommended if your slides are behind, and pushing the F5 key on your keyboard will refresh the page. You can find additional answers to some of the common technical problems that you might experience that will be located in the Help Engagement tool at the bottom of the screen. So we're done with all the housekeeping. We're now going to go into what promises to be an extremely exciting and engaging event, and of course, building bridges when it comes to the time of COVID-19 being the overall theme. It is now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker for this morning, and that is none other than Mr. Alan Tawanda Maduro. A little bit of information about Alan is that he holds a Master's of Science degree in Agricultural Applied Economics and Honors, BSc degree in Agricultural Economics and Extension from the University of Pretoria and the University of Zimbabwe, respectively. His career started with the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development in 2004, and that was as a senior economist in the Economics and Markets Division. Thereafter, he joined the International Crop Research Institute for the Semi-Arid Tropics, and in 2009 as a scientific officer, where he worked on improving the performance of agricultural input and output markets in Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Zambia, Malawi, and Nigeria, as well as harmonizing seed policies for the SADC region. Mr. Maduro joined Zimtrade in April 2014 as the SME Export Development Manager. His expertise in developing SMEs and maintaining client satisfaction afforded him a promotion to Director of Operations in 2015. Mr. Maduro was appointed acting CEO of Zimtrade in March 2018 and was confirmed as the substantive CEO in September 2018. Mr. Maduro is also the current Agricultural Marketing Authority Board Chairman, having been appointed in October 2019. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to ask Mr. Alan Maduro to take to the webinar and to talk to us about how small businesses have overcome COVID-19. Alan. Alan, I'm going to ask you to unmute your mic.
Sorry about that. No, sorry. Anyway, let me start again. I said, thank you very much for the introduction. I had forgot, I almost thought that was not me when you're doing the introductions. I thought it was someone else. Then when you then said my name, then realized it was me. Thank you very much for the introduction. But before we get into the presentation, I think I would like to tell people about what is Zimtrade and what we do. We are the national trade body, and our job is to develop and promote exports. So through our interactions with SMEs, we experienced quite a lot in terms of what they did for them to remain afloat during this COVID period. So I'm going to talk more briefly into that. Before I get into how they overcome the challenges, but I think it's important for us to just have a preview of the challenges that they were facing. I think if you look closely, there was a disruption in labor. When the global lockdown happened, even locally, there were lockdowns and essential services were only moving. People had to work from home. And if you look at the SMEs, most of them are family owned. So as soon as companies close, board meetings happen at home. So imagine an instance where there's an outbreak of a family individual who runs a business, and all of a sudden there's need for social distancing and the business is put on hold because the key figure of the family is not there to make sure that decisions move. So people now have to go virtually to make sure business moves. And also, there was no interface with clients. We normally check our SMEs, even our startups, to check promotion events where they interface with buyers for them to sell their goods. I'll give an example of one of our manufacturers who produces biscuits and even candy. So they were having a virtual meeting and he was selling his candy and biscuits. But the issue is now, when you're doing it virtually, you're not able to taste what you're selling. So it made it difficult for people to do business. But either way, I'm going to talk about how then people overcame such challenges in terms of selling manufactured goods. Some of the services that were sold virtually, it was easy to move, but some of the manufactured goods, people had to now go around in terms of making sure that they're accessible during the negotiation. And also, there was a drop in demand. Companies stopped working, demand fell, disposable income fell. So, in actual fact, SMEs now had to reorient themselves to make sure that they still capture the market and at the same time remaining relevant in the business. And most of our SMEs are cross-border traders. So you can imagine what happened when borders closed. Some of them sank, but some of them were quick to get onto their feet, remained focused, and kept on business going. And the Council of Defense that made sure that business is linked also contributed to the same. And one other key aspect that really affected the manufacturers was the delay in the movement of raw materials. You know, when the global lockdown happened, most of the countries started resorting to making sure that their companies will resourced in terms of the import of raw materials. So most of the SMEs, I think, don't have the capacity to have buffer stocks in terms of having raw materials to deal with their business like the big companies. So they also had to deal with that. So moving on, I'll start with some positive outcomes for SMEs during the COVID period. You know, Zimbabwe, I'll give an example of Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is well endowed. We've got a good climate, and our supply window of fresh produce to the UK, to Europe, and to the Middle East is quite good. And our climatic conditions makes our products very lucrative. I'll give you a challenge. If you go into Europe, go into Tesco's, Albert Heijn, if you eat any blueberry or mashed peas, if they taste organic and sweet, don't bother reading about the label. It's from Zimbabwe. That I can guarantee you. So our companies now are now taking advantage of that because people have now become more health cautious due to the COVID issue. People are taking vitamin C, taking garlic, and taking ginger. And most of our small-scale guys have managed to tap into that market. I'll give you an example. We've got a small-scale community in the Eastern Highlands of Zimbabwe that was hit by Cyclone Idai. As we speak right now, they're planning to export organic pineapples to the Netherlands. So COVID or no COVID, SMEs in the food chain had to make sure that nations are fed. So for us, that's an example. That's a good example because they remain sustainable, even though COVID affected the country, and also eating habits changed. And people, we have to make sure that we also adjust those eating habits. Issue of PPE and also disinfecting. I think most of the SMEs, those that were agile enough, quickly shifted into the production of PPE. You know, those in the clothing sector, demand of clothing went down because people were no longer buying clothes. So they decided to go into the manufacture of PPE. And these have remained afloat. Some of them have even begun to export what they have in the region to make sure that they get some foreign currency. And some have even gone a step further to go into the disinfecting business, just to buy some equipment to make sure that they move around disinfecting. But one key thing that we have to notice, these changes have to be innovative and they have to move with the market. Because in the absence of that, we might be well now, but as soon as the situation stabilizes, some of them may be out of business due to lack of sustainability and also moving with the market. I think this diagram is basically showing the aspect of change that is key when things happen. Some of the SMEs that have managed to keep abreast have managed to quickly move, re-strategize, rethink. You know, for you to remain in business, you have to identify, you have to be addressing a need or a challenge. And also you have to move with the trend in terms of how the market is changing. That's how you remain in business. So some of the SMEs we have left behind in terms of changing how they think or how they do their businesses, most of them fell on the wayside. But some of them who have moved with the changes that are happening, have managed to keep to be in business in terms of that cycle of change. Product diversification. We have startups and SMEs that have moved from their normal range of business. I'll give you an example. We've got an SME called Fresh in a Box that used to do deliveries of vegetables, fresh produce. But when then COVID came in, they then added a lot of things into their basket because there was minimum movement and people also needed to eat. So their business remained viable and also even became profitable from what we see in terms of the COVID era. So product diversification is quite key in terms of remaining afloat. We have had other companies that have also moved, like what I said, from just merely manufacturing clothing material, producing PPE. This has helped SMEs to remain afloat in their business. Market diversification. I think what we saw during this period is most of the companies tended to focus internally and also in the region. It was easy to move product. And for us, I'll tell you, we've got a couple of SMEs. One that has managed to export granular, the cereals to Zambia. And also at the same time, during the same period, during this COVID period, we offered a facility to even set up in Botswana. So this is an example of an SME that has managed to withstand the tough conditions of COVID and even make more impact during the same period. So these are examples that others can tap into to make sure that they also remain resilient during this period. And most of them also, to diversify the markets, they've developed online platforms to make sure that their goods are marketed and move easily during this period. I'll go to innovation. I think this has been key in most instances. We've had a lot of youth-led businesses becoming innovative, putting in place applications that are used to make sure that their businesses remain afloat. And the diaspora also played a big role, because what was happening now is the diaspora was using these innovative platforms to make sure that they give food to their loved ones through these innovative platforms. And this has led to a lot of changes that have happened. We've got a company, an SME, that was into the production of garlic. Right now, they're exporting garlic oil to Botswana because people have become more health conscious. And we produce organic foodstuffs and natural foodstuffs. So instead of exporting garlic, this SME is now exporting the garlic oil that is required by people in terms of boosting the immune system. So these are quite good innovations that have come for in terms of some of the SMEs really staying afloat in the business. I'll go to issue of virtual presence. I think now, where we are on a virtual platform, this has become the norm. And no business, whether small or large, can run away from this. You might have your product, but if nobody is seeing it, you cannot do anything. I always tell this joke to people where they say, doing business is good, but if people don't know what you're doing, it's like whispering to a girl in the dark and say to the girl, I love you, and that girl is not seeing you. So we need to light up the room, and we need for people to see the type of business that we're doing, so that at least we can then foster linkages in terms of B2B with the people that are doing the business. And for us as Zimtrade, what we are now then doing to assist these small-scale players tap into the International Business Forum, we have launched, and actually the platform is there, but we're going to launch it in the next couple of weeks, where we are going to assist our SMEs showcase their products, what we call the Shop at Zim portal. The issue is, if you look at some of our women, we've got women in the craft sector, their challenge was to get access, and they did not have the numbers even to have a website to catalog their goods and services. So they've come together as a group, an association, which is pulling resources together so that they reduce the transaction cost. And also that gives them power, and they negotiate with the buyers so that they have standard pricing of their goods and services. But if you look at them, they don't have the capacity to even showcase their crafts, which are very good. I wish I had put a slide there to show you some of the crafts. So this portal is going to assist them, make sure that they are known in the whole world, that they produce these things, but also working on aspects to do with quality and quantity, because we don't want a situation whereby our SMEs then overpromise, and in the process, they are not able to meet demand that would have come with the exposure that they have. They have to eat what they can swallow. Sometimes we eat what we cannot swallow and we promote ourselves into insolvency. So we try to avoid such things so that they remain afloat. I think this aspect also addresses the issue of business support networks. I think people underestimate the importance of forming associations to assist your businesses as SMEs. And most of them have done that. But there's need for a unified vision and social cohesion for them to deliver on the same. Numbers are quite critical in getting to business. Individualism will not get us anywhere. So we're encouraging our SMEs to cluster. For example, we developed a cluster up north of farmers who are now exporting fresh produce to DRC. As you can see, the examples that I'm giving are concentrating in the African region. And in a way, we are also promoting intra-Africa trade to make sure that we facilitate our SMEs to contribute their fair share in intra-Africa trade. So they've managed to give the volumes to DRC in terms of fresh produce, but more is required. So if we have more clusters and more business support networks within the SME sector, this can help them thrive during this period where demand is depressed, but people still need to eat. So it's also about knowing what sector you need to focus on, because at the end of the day, when you form a business, you want to address a challenge. And if you're not addressing a challenge, then it simply becomes a hobby. And, you know, hobbies and business don't mix. So they're doing a hobby or a business. So people need to clearly differentiate the two aspects. I think, Ronin, with those few words, I would like to urge people to really consider doing business with Zimbabwe. We offer a wide range of quality fresh produce, which if you eat, you remain healthy for the rest of your life, and COVID will not even touch you. I thank you.
Alan, thank you so much, and for those insights into small businesses, how they've, I'm reticent to use the term, but I am going to use it, how they've pivoted over this period to take advantage, and again, I say that lightly, not meaning in a negative way, of the COVID-19 environment in order to continue growing. I'm sure we're going to have a serious engagement post our next speaker, where we will delve into some of the key issues that our audience want to address with you today. Before we go there, we are going to have a quick poll question, and I'm going to put it to you. So please utilize your platform in front of you to answer this question. The question is, during the COVID-19 pandemic, so far, do you think SMEs have proven to be more or less adaptable than bigger businesses? And you'll have a selection there. You can choose more adaptable, about the same, and less adaptable. So I'll give you just a minute there to answer the question. Again, during the COVID-19 pandemic, so far, do you think that SMEs, small, medium enterprises, have proven to be more or less adaptable than bigger businesses? Thank you for giving us your answer to that question. Right, so it is now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, and that is Basem Lukil, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Lukil Group, which is comprised of 35 subsidiaries and more than 4,500 employees in various sectors, covering industry, automotive, agribusiness, construction, and public works, trade and services, ICT, and renewable energy. So a myriad of different sectoral focuses there. He's also the president of the Tunisia Africa Business Council, which is a non-governmental organization whose goal is to put Africa at the heart of the Tunisian economic foreign policy, as well as its private sector's future strategy. Without further ado, if I can call on Basem Lukil to take to the webinar.
All right, thank you very much, Barbara. Thank you, Alan, for the excellent presentation. I'm sure after the COVID is over, my first trip will probably be to Zimbabwe. I've heard a lot about it, and I've been following up on that country for quite a while, so I hope I'll get a chance to go and taste all the good things he's been telling us about this morning. That was a fresh start. Thank you for inviting me today. As you know, Tunisia, the southern border of the Mediterranean, has had its share, of course, of the COVID-19 problems. Like you said, we've been promoting Tunisia as a gateway to Africa, and that, of course, goes without saying with several challenges. And the COVID-19 and dealing with the COVID-19 with the idea that Tunisia is a gateway, which means it's a transit platform either for businesses or passengers or people traveling from Europe to Africa, from Asia to Africa, going through Tunisia, and the challenges we had to face in terms of the health crisis. So, so far, I think in terms of the COVID-19 cases, contamination, Tunisia has pulled its weight, and we at least came out rather in a good position out of the first wave. Now we are going through the second phase, as we might call it, or maybe the third phase. And that brings new challenges, of course, to the business community. SMEs, small businesses, are the first ones to suffer of the economic consequences of the pandemic, of course. Remember, Tunisia's trading partner, number one trading partner, is Europe. The European market accounts for 85% of our commerce and trade. That's challenging because when you see the situation and the consequences of the pandemic on the European continent as a whole, and the drop in its GDP, especially in the second quarter, you look at Europe, overall GDP losing close to 12 trillion in volume. You look at the French market, which is probably our first trading partner out of the European community as a whole, a drop of almost 9.5%, 9.8%. They expect an annual drop or a recession rate of 7.5%. The second trading partner today has become China. China has pulled its weight, of course, because it had the COVID-19 crisis early on, and therefore had a rather robust growth rate in the second quarter of 2020, where everywhere else in the world we've seen drops varying from 5.7 all the way to 23. India having had one of the biggest drops. Tunisia has had its share also for minus 21.8%, with an increase in unemployment of 18%. Italy, also our second trading partner in the European community outside China, which is our number two, also had a major drop in its economic outlook. The lockout or the confinement, the general confinement that we all went through during the months of April and May, of course, carried a lot of challenges and opportunities at the same time for our SMEs, our business community, the self-employed, those who were already unemployed and were looking for a job at the time where the COVID-19 crisis hit. And we had to look and see what was going on in the other markets that were either close to us or maybe ahead of us, and see what kind of experience they've had, how they managed to minimize the economic cost or the economic loss of this general confinement or the total lockout of their economy. Some other markets chose other routes like Germany, Sweden, Denmark. We also, as a business community, were looking at what those countries were doing and how they were handling the economic policy and the economic outlook in view of their different strategies dealing with the COVID. And the end result was that during the months of April and May, you take the French market as an example, and you see a lot that the business community has managed to resort to new techniques, new tools, concentrate heavily on the digital field. So they went digital all the way. If you look at the new companies or new startups, you see that the French are way ahead. In the months of April and May, they had somewhere between 48 and 50% decrease in the number of new startups, especially SMEs, and that's coming from those self-employed staying at home using the digital world to innovate, come up with new ideas, and try them on the digital world. We look at the overall use of the digital field worldwide on the online shopping. You see that according to some statistics which we mentioned at the presentation, almost 2.5 million new buyers came online. Of course, they had no choice because of the confinement, but these probably were reluctant users before the COVID, and they became now regular users of the online shopping because of that, and they probably stay on. These are some of the outcomes of the COVID-19, and these are lessons to be learned, and that's what I think our SMEs were looking for, and were in some way either taking lessons from or copying in order to survive. Of course, our infrastructure in terms of telecommunication, Wi-Fi, and what have you is not the same as that of Europe, but we have to also compare ourselves with other countries who have basically the same infrastructure outlook, the same ideas, the same level of development. And looking at that, I think we've had many good surprises. Like I said, the challenges are there, but we have to move forward. And the one key conclusion we all came out of is that digital or digitalization is the way forward. This COVID-19 is not about to go away tomorrow. We have to wait for a vaccine. That's going to take another 6 to 12 months. What do we do between now and then? In view of the current economic and social situation, we have an unemployment rate of 18% that may go up to 21 or 22% by the end of the year. Those are the projected numbers from the government. Our GDP may shrink by 7 to 8% by year end. That's also another challenge to the business community. Many companies in Europe are going bankrupt. Our biggest market is seeing many clients and customers and distribution channels being disrupted, going out of business, moving in different areas. At the same time, many of those same buyers and same partners are moving some of their production sites back to Europe and looking at the southern border, which is the North African mainly area, to reallocate production, to reallocate resources and investments. So you have challenges. Yes, you have some losses on one side, but looking forward, we have other opportunities to capitalize on. And all of those opportunities are the result of course, the consequence of the globalization that was tested for the first time ever by this COVID-19. Globalization was okay and all the way until probably September, October 2019. Nobody ever thought that if one big country like China were to have a disruption in its production and supply chain, the rest of the world will be affected. So that is one of the biggest lessons, and that's one of the biggest drawbacks of the COVID-19 crisis, is that it pushed many multinational companies in Europe and in the States to rethink their supply chains, recapitalize on the experience to see how they can accelerate their digital access to production, online, distance, how they bring closer also their production sites and their supply chains closer to home. And we as Tunisians, being closest to Europe, we think that's where the opportunities lie ahead. That's where we should be looking at, and that's where we should be focusing on. How do we attract these new investments? How do we best position ourselves as the next best production site for these multinational companies? Tunisia had had its successes in the past with automotive parts. We are probably one of the biggest suppliers of auto parts into the European community. That has been a good and robust business for the last 15 years. Textiles, up until the 90s, we were one of the first partners of the European community. But now there is a rethinking of the textile industry and is coming back to Tunisia. Tourism, of course, has been our biggest provider of foreign currency, and unfortunately, this year it has been a total collapse. So that needs to be rethought, and tourism has to be really reconfigured again, because we're not at our last COVID or pandemic. I think with this globalization, with the health risks that we are incurring on a daily basis, I think there will be other health crises, and we have to prepare ourselves for those future health crises. Let's hope that won't happen with this magnitude. Let's hope that we have learned our lessons so that we don't incur such big risks in the future. But one has to keep them in mind, and the tourism industry in Tunisia has to be completely rethought so that we will not go through what we have seen this year. So automotive parts, electrical components. Yes, we are a food provider as well. Fresh fruit and vegetables on a daily basis to Europe. That also has brought lots of new and startup companies into the field, just like Alan was witnessing for the Zimbabwe market and startup companies there. Digital. Tunisia's health system has seen a revolution the last 5 months, thanks to the digital e-learning and performing at a distance that helped the health industry and the hospitals and the health ministry in dealing with the COVID-19 in its first phase with a minimum cost. That has been a successful experience, and I think that's a know-how that now we can capitalize on in the future for the African market, our neighboring markets, as well as the European market. So, in short, what we need to do for our SMEs is give them the tools, the infrastructure, the financing, and the technical support in terms of training, looking out for new markets, marketing these new technologies, the new startups, giving them the marketing tools they need in order to capitalize on these new channels and these new opportunities. The figures are there. India, who has invested heavily on the digital industry, it's well known now for its internet industry and its digital platforms, has seen its economy shrink by 23% in the second quarter. That's something we need to focus on and learn from, which means that digital, yes, it's the way forward, but if we don't do it properly, if we don't capitalize on the services, the added value services, where most competitive, we will not be pulling out much profit out of this or advantage as we would like to think. So even within the digital industry or the digital world, we have to focus on what we can do best. It's a very competitive world out there. Tunisian SMEs or startups have the brains and the technical means to survive, to compete, but we have to find to put together a strategy that gives them enough strength to compete, to protect their copyrights, to help them identify themselves and go out to these new markets. And by that, also, we need to, as a business community, change our way of doing business with the European community. We need now to invest in these markets in terms of buying out companies to secure distribution channels so that we are no longer subject to financial risks or bankruptcy risks of certain companies beyond which we will lose these markets. So we need to have advanced platforms in the European community in view of the new challenges that lots of these companies have. We also have to invest into our African markets so that the intra-trade with Africa can go up in great numbers over the next 5 years so that we are no longer dependent on at 85% of our exchanges just with one customer, which is the European community. We need to diversify. Yes, we need to keep developing our relationship with the European community, but we also need to diversify that by focusing more and more on the intra-African trade business using of course, the free trade agreement, which will give us many advantages that probably other companies like Turkey or China, our main competitors in this market, will not have. So that's one of the opportunities we need to focus on. We need also to change our way of marketing ourselves, marketing our businesses. Like I said earlier, traditional marketing strategies no longer function. You've seen in the last 4 months complete changeover, a makeover of the digital world and how people market their products, how they position them, how they attract customers, and now how they tackle customers. Look at what Facebook did. They provided several platforms for international brands to go out there and reposition themselves using the digital world instead of just physical showrooms or the traditional display channels. So yes, the COVID-19 did cause economic and social pain, but we need to capitalize on that. Let's turn that into an opportunity for our startup companies, SMEs, and see how we can transform them using the digital world, using the weaknesses that we've identified in the last 5 months to turn them into strength and tackle these markets. The last thing I need to say is that governments in this particular time have to really step up, provide financing for these SMEs and these startup companies. We know that for the next 12 months, access to capital will be very difficult as governments have to fight themselves and battle to fight unemployment, all of those state companies like the airline industry, and all the financing and the financial support they need that's taking up lots of these resources. Train and shipping companies, all of these companies are in need of great amounts of capital. So if we don't also provide the needed capital, they need seed capital, they need the restructuring capital to these SMEs and startup companies, then all these opportunities we've been talking about for the last 15 minutes would go to waste. So focus on those opportunities. I'm sure lots of countries in the African continent look at Tunisia as an example. We have lots of common points, and I think that we can pull, Africa in particular, can pull its way through this crisis stronger with many, many opportunities for its young, unemployed, but innovative and success-driven population.
Bassem, thank you very much for those valuable insights. And again, we're going to have the opportunity to engage in a question and answer session with yourself and Alan in just a moment. Before we get there, I'd like to move to our second poll question, and that is up on your screen right now. How do you view the prospects for the global economic recovery over the next decade? Let me repeat that question. How do you view the prospects for the global economic recovery over the next decade? And you have a selection between I am optimistic, I am cautiously optimistic, or I am pessimistic. If, again, you can input your answer and we will poll the results of that question. I'll give you just a minute to do that. Perfect. We're now going to move on to the Q&A session, and I'm going to ask Alan to come back and to join us. Alan, thank you so much. And I think we've got to start with our first question here, which I'm going to put to both of you and give you both the opportunity to answer. Do you believe that there's scope for working practices to remain permanently altered as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, bearing in mind that both of you have alluded to the digital trends that have gripped the world and how we need to take advantage of those trends? Alan, would you like to come in first, followed by Bassem?
No, thank you very much for the tough question. See, everything has to be market-driven. If it makes sense for businesses to work from home and things like that, then people should carry on. Because at the end of the day, when we do our businesses, we have got targets, we've got objectives. If they can be achieved at the workplace or at home, who cares? At the end of the day, we want a product delivered. So, but for me, I think there's going to be a change in the way people do business going forward in terms of due to this COVID, because tastes have changed, and that has interrupted the value chain. And also, the way we do business is definitely going to change going forward. Some of the big companies have resorted to saying no more offices, everyone works from home. And that's a permanent feature going forward. So for some jobs, for some people like us, I think working from home can be 50% and 50% working from the office. But I believe the change is there. It's going to come.
Basema, I'm sure you're going to reiterate the thoughts there put forward by Alan, that it is going to be a hybrid of our prior physical reality and our new virtual reality going forward.
For sure. Let's keep in mind one thing, though. You know, in developed countries, the gap between white and blue-collar jobs is not great, which means that the advantage of the white-collar jobs having the opportunity to work from home, blue-collar ones don't have. So let's make sure that everybody gets the same amount of opportunities on this new digital world. Manufacturing services in general will not be able to take advantage of this digital world in the near future. Yes, new investments, new factories will probably be focused more on the digital and the robotics and the new technologies more than the previous ones. But in the meantime, let's make sure that the blue-collar ones and those who are involved in the field are not put at the disadvantage, creating even more social tensions. The post-COVID-19 economy or world has to take into account the social gaps that were put at the under the light in some of the biggest economies in the world, like in the United States and some other markets, where you see the big gap in between the very rich and the very poor. And therefore, let's make sure that in the post-COVID-19 world, the digital or the working at home, or what we call the télétravail in French, does not create even a bigger gap between those or three different job classes. Yes, there will be challenges. Yes, there will be transformation. I just hope that at the end of the day, the productivity of working at home is as good, as great that working from an office, and the controls are there, the evaluations are probably done at the end of the day, because it's going to be a challenging one for managers to evaluate the job, the efficiency, and the productivity each employee working at a distance. That's one. Two, let's make sure also that these working home parents do not end up in divorce because they see each other on a daily basis, and family tensions are created. That's one aspect that we need to look at what happened in France after the confinement. The divorce rate just exploded, and I'm sure it's same worldwide. So let's make sure that the working at home does not solve problems but create new ones.
Exactly, and I think that's a very valid consideration there, Bassem. Alan, we've got a question coming through saying, what mechanisms have you put in place to ensure patenting to encourage or protect innovation?
No, thank you very much for that. We have what we call as the marketing and branding for international competitiveness program that we put in place with the assistance of the International Trade Center in Geneva. So that program also assists companies in terms of them patenting their goods and services. And we work closely with ARIPO. This is the African regional body responsible for patenting goods and services. And we also have got our own ZIPO, the Zimbabwean body responsible for that. So they assist our SMEs in terms of making sure that their goods and services are patented in Zimbabwe, and also in countries that are part of ARIPO as an organization, for their goods to be protected.
Bassem, a question coming through for you. Given the African Continental Free Trade Area being upon us, what would you suggest the continent should do to prepare for COVID-19-like pandemics going forward?
Well, what Africa needs today is what we call the logistics platforms, be it at airports or ports, giving all African companies that have already, or African countries that have already signed up on the free trade agreement to start actually tasting the fruit and the return on investment of this great trade agreement that we made. We need to build 3-4 major platforms for people to go into, to exchange, to get to know each other. We have 55 countries, 54 or 5, depending on how you count, 54 economies, separate individual economies in Africa. So when we talk about Africa as a continent, yes, it's one big continent, but really it goes down to 54 different separate markets. We can't tackle all of those. We cannot be aware of all the opportunities that are there. So in order to capitalize and move quickly on this free trade agreement and let all of our business communities, wherever they are, that there are opportunities and how they can reach them, we need to create 3 or 4 big platforms for trade, investment, for distribution. You could take Kenya, for instance. You can take Ivory Coast. You can take Tunisia or Morocco in North Africa. You have South Africa. These are the key points from which we need to launch our investment and trade for the free trade agreement, or the creation of this famous and long-awaited free trade zone. Even air transportation between African countries is very difficult. You can't expect a businessman to go from one country to another on a tour without great difficulties, by expending days and hours in airports just to go from one neighboring country to another. You might have to actually travel to 2 other countries before arriving there. So best to capitalize on this and move forward quickly with the free trade agreement, we need to create these logistics and exchange platforms in key countries that have access to at least 3 or 4 other major markets all around it. There's no simple answer, but in my experience and the years I've worked on this African market, I see that this is the best solution in order to move quickly. You could move traditionally, it's going to take you many, many years. If we do this, and the Afrexim Bank is probably best suited to create these logistics zones, these free trade zones, before going to the free trade agreement all over the continent. We need to create these 3 or 4 major platforms, free trade zones, with all the amenities, with all the infrastructure that is required for people to invest, to meet, exchange, and build a better future for Africa.
Alan, some questions on the SME side, and I'm going to put 3 to you that have come through. Firstly, do you have any mechanism in place that is looking at SMEs in the informal sector? So that's the first one. Then the issue of SMEs accessing finance. Sorry, that is, do you have any mechanism? Do you have any mechanism in place that is looking to SMEs in the informal sector? Is the first question.
Okay.
And then, if I can add another one there, the issue of SMEs accessing finance for projects and programs. How best can banks assist them? Because most of them have huge challenges in accessing these. If you could handle those 2 for me, Alan.
Thank you very much. First one on the mechanisms for assisting SMEs in the formal sector. So what we have done in the past for trade, I'll talk about the cross-border traders, because most of them are highly informal. So we have encouraged them to come into groups. I'll give an example of what we did when we then sent orders for them in Lubumbashi, DRC. We had a container, and then we facilitated for them to put all their wares, arts and crafts, etc., goods manufactured into one container to save on transaction costs. And we then advised them, can you please nominate an individual that will then or individuals. That would then go with the container, rather than for all of you to go to DRC, and we have got massive transaction costs. And at the end of the day, what you sell and what you return in terms of the transaction costs is very few. So we did that, and I think we put in place a group of around 40 informal guys. They shipped the container, and I think they sold the container, the goods, worth more than 90,000 USD. And for informal people, that's a lot of money. But what we're also then doing and telling them is, if you look at Zimbabwe and Zambia and Zimbabwe and Malawi, we've got what we call the simplified trade regime, whereby if you have got goods less than 1,000 USD and you then want to go and sell them, you don't have to go through all these laborious processes that a normal exporter would go through. You just go to the border, register goods, you pass through, you go to Zambia, and then you sell your goods and services. And the same applies for Malawi. We have that simplified trade regime. So it's also facilitating the informal sector guys to do export business. But we then encourage them to say, you know, going forward, you might then get an order of maybe somebody requiring 10 containers. And some of these orders are then difficult to process when you are informal. So at some stage, you need your business to grow. And now formalizing the informal becomes pertinent for businesses to grow. And SME success in finance, I totally agree with the person asking the question. And normally what we've witnessed for an SME, and if you go to the bank, they see someone who wants to steal money from them. They totally label you that this is not a viable person, we cannot invest just because you're an SME. And it's a big challenge. And also most of the financial products, they are mainly tailored to big companies, and they'll also ask you that you need to have collateral. And if you look at the SMEs, most of them don't have collateral to what? To then hedge for them when they borrow. So it's quite a huge concern. But for instance, for us, we've managed to set up what we call SMETCO, a small enterprises bank, which is trying to address that need. But also, as I've said before, I normally encourage people to form associations and leverage on associations when it comes to borrowing, because sometimes volumes make sense. And for SMEs in the export business, normally we use the market as collateral, because when you export, you get foreign currency. So the bank that then would have given you money would deduct its needs from the transaction, and then you remain with your profit along the way. But it's a tough sell at the end of the day. But the issue is also, as SMEs, we also have a challenge to prove to the people who give money that we are honest business people and who deliver on what we do.
So another question coming through, and either Alan or Basem, you can jump in here, but how are you motivating African countries to sign international IP treaties? And the person who's asking this question really stresses that this is crucial.
Sorry, I did not get you.
How are you motivating African countries to sign international IP treaties? This is crucial, to sign international IP treaties.
No, yeah.
Can you
No, it's very crucial. You know, at the end of the day, when you try to convince people, the same issue must be addressing a need or a challenge. And people should also see business sense out of signing such treaties. So the issue is we put the business aspect in front from our end to say, if we sign this treaty, these are benefits that will accrue to us as a country. More so now with the coming through of the African Continental Free Trade Area, we need such so that it bolsters countries to trade effectively and protect all those things that they'll be trading across the continent. So the issue is incentivizing the countries to say, if you do this, these are the benefits that will come through to the specific country and also businesses in that country.
Can I jump on that?
Yes, of course you can.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes, we've had many treaties in the Tunisian market side, the European counterparts, Turkey, China. The one thing you need to focus on before signing these treaties is how to protect your infant industries first. We have been talking about SMEs, startup companies. If you don't put forward a certain mechanism to protect these growing young infant industries against these giants who just come out and wipe them out from day one, these treaties should not be signed. So each country needs to look at its advantages, its weaknesses, and what it's going to get out of these treaties, weigh all of the benefits in first. Otherwise, certain key industries will probably disappear. Unemployment will jump before it goes down, and they may have overestimated sometimes the foreign investments they were getting or the markets they will get access to. Yes, we need to be part of these international trade organization, these exchanges. Of course, with the African Free Trade Agreement, the challenges are less because we all have basic industries. We don't have these big revolutionary industries. Most of our countries at different stages are focusing on the primary industries first. And that's why we need to put our entire continent together in order to invest heavily as Africans first. But these IP treaties, we have to be careful. We have to watch out for key industries so that they will not be tackled and bought out by international companies whose sole drive is just benefits, benefits, benefits. If there are certain barriers and certain requirements for investments into the country in order to develop these industries in partnership with the locals, yes, I'm all in.
Just a final question before we go to a video presentation on IATF. And I'm going to put this to both of you again. Alan, let's start with you. It is one of the polled questions as to whether you are optimistic or pessimistic for the prospects of a global economic recovery over the coming decade. Alan, your thoughts?
I thought Bassem was going to start so that I can pick it up, but anyway. I'll go.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So for me, I think I was cautiously optimistic because we're dealing with the global environment. It's no longer about Africa. But for me, Africa is on the move. Africa is on the move. As much as some of us can be landlocked, but for me, we are definitely land-linked. So that's a key component for us as Africa. But if Africa is on the move, is it moving with the other continents? Because it's a global village. So that's why I'm saying, for us, there are a lot of advantages as Africa, even the continental free trade area, trading amongst ourselves. And even if you look at the statistics on COVID, the impact was very minimum on Africa. So it also offers a safe haven for would-be investors to come to Africa because there was minimum disruption in terms of activity. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I know it will happen, but also being cautious at the end of the day.
We'll take that cautiously optimistic. Bassem.
Well, look, there is no clear answer. I'm very pessimistic for the next 6 months. But once I think, because the entire world is now agonized by this virus. Investments are not moving forward. They've all been postponed until 2021. Trade is mainly focused on the basic food and basic textiles. Nothing is really moving towards it. And the relaunch or the ignition will only come once the vaccine is in place, once the vaccine is available worldwide, not just in one country, isolated from the rest of the world. So I remain pessimistic for the next 6 to 9 months. I believe that the world will see a major recovery starting June of 2021. All of these postponed decisions, investments, purchases, everything, I think will create a major boom for 2022. starting second half of 2021. Between now and then, we have to remain cautious. We have to minimize health risks, economic risks. Governments have to really step up their intervention, because the private sector alone cannot make it through. In Tunisia, for example, 75% of the labor force is within the private sector. 25% are in the public sector. And yet you see that the government is only focusing on providing benefits and salaries for the public sector employees, whereas all the support and financial support for the private sector is lacking and way behind. At the end of the day, if you don't maintain those two in parallel at the same time, you're going to end up with 25, 28% unemployment rate, which will delay your recovery into 2021. Probably it will take you 3 to 5 years for recovery. And that's why I caution most governments.
Yes. Just at the final point there, you were saying you're hoping most governments
would take that into account. Okay, if, pouring billions of dollars into a national airline company, fine. But that's only a tiny portion of the overall picture and the employment base that you have. Those 7 or 10 billion euros you poured into one airline company, had you taken half of it and poured it into the private sector, you may have saved 10 to 15 times number of employees and companies, which will take you years to build again. Okay, fine, you can have these startups and 60% increase in number, but look at the success rate at the end of the day of these SMEs or these startup companies. The success rate is very thin, which means you have to build many, many startups, many SMEs in order to have within a 3-year window, 10% surviving. So if you don't focus on... Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Let's hope there that scenario 1 prevails and we look to a more positive environment come June 2021, and then moving into a further positive environment.
A very robust recovery.
Exactly. Now, we're going to just look at 2 videos on the upcoming IATF. Again, remembering that this is going to be the event calendar in 2021, September the 6th to September the 12th. Let's just review a couple of videos on IATF 2021.
Join Africa's largest trade and investment fair in Rwanda. Intra-African Trade Fair gives you access to more than 1,100 exhibitors, 10,000 visitors and buyers, and more than 5,000 conference delegates from more than 55 countries. Participate in trade and investment deals worth $40 billion as business and government come together to explore business and networking opportunities at the International Exhibition. Brought to you by the African Export-Import Bank and their premium partners. The IATF 2021, transforming Africa.
انضم إلى أكبر معرض تجاري واستثماري في أفريقيا في رواندا. يمنحك المعرض الأفريقي للتجارة البينية فرصة التعامل مع أكثر من 1100 جهة عارضة و10,000 زائر ومشتر وأكثر من 5,000 مندوب مؤتمر من أكثر من 55 دولة. يمكنك المشاركة في صفقات التجارة والاستثمار بقيمة 40 مليار دولار أمريكي، حيث يتعاون قطاع الأعمال والحكومة معا في استكشاف فرص الأعمال والتواصل في المعرض الدولي الذي سيضم تبادلا إبداعيا إفريقيا نظمه لكم البنك الأفريقي للاستيراد والتصدير وشركائه المميزين. المعرض الأفريقي للتجارة البينية 2021، منبر التحول الأفريقي.
And that brings us to the end of this digital presentation. A huge thank you to Alan Maduro and to Bassem Lukil for their insights and their engagement and taking the time to answer the questions. Again, thank you so much to the audience for the interactivity that you've shown through that line of questioning. And certainly as we build up to IATF 2021, we'll have further engagements in the road to that lead up. please would you take time just to fill in the survey, which will pop up on your screens directly after this webinar. Again, thank you so much to all who have participated, and we look forward to joining you again, as I said, in the lead up to IATF 2021.